We're on week 11 of our live cooking series. We are continuing on with another seasonal recipe using our seasonal summer ingredients. So we're making today a soba noodle salad. So this is one of my favorite go-to dishes to have on hand for an easy lunch during the week. Actually don't make it near often enough because every time I make it, I love it. But it really is pretty easy to assemble. It's just a lot of chopping up all the veggies that go into it, and then it just all comes together really, really quickly. So if you're unfamiliar with soba noodles, so this is one package. So they are traditional Japanese noodles, and they're made from buckwheat. So traditionally they're 100% buckwheat. And now buckwheat sounds like it has wheat in it because it's buckwheat. But buckwheat is actually a 100% gluten-free grain. So buckwheat flour is gluten-free. Buckwheat, if you cook it, for anybody who grew up eating like kasha or something like that, that has buckwheat groats in it. So 100% buckwheat is 100% gluten-free. But a lot of soba noodles that are sold here in the US in just mainstream grocery stores are processed a bit differently, and a lot of them are made with wheat flour and buckwheat flour. So the reason they do that is because the gluten in the wheat helps to make the noodles a bit more buckwheat noodles themselves, like traditional soba noodles, are very delicate. They'll be very soft. So sometimes they'll process them with wheat to make them a bit sturdier, and then they're more like the spaghetti and kind of pasta that we know. So that's not really a traditional buckwheat noodle or a traditional soba noodle. So I say this because if you are somebody who needs to be gluten-free because you have celiac disease or some other sort of allergy or intolerance to gluten, that is something to seriously be aware of when you are shopping for soba noodles. Read the ingredients, and if it says, just 100% buckwheat flour, you're good. But if there's wheat flour in there, then they're not gluten-free. So something to be cautious of. I just want to give that disclaimer at the beginning of today. So we are cooking up these soba noodles. They cook up pretty quickly, quicker than like a whole wheat spaghetti. Usually somewhere between like around 7 minutes or so. But so that's why I say in the recipe, just, cook them according to your package directions. Again, because if, they have wheat in them or they're 100% buckwheat, whatever it is, they'll all cook up a little bit differently. But they cook, the same way in boiling water. And then we will drain them and rinse them. They're a little bit starchier than regular pasta, so we want to rinse them actually after they come out of the boiling water. We want to rinse them with cold water to get some of that starch off of them so they don't get all clumpy and stick together. So that's an important piece here, or whenever you're cooking soba noodles, that's just something to know. You want to rinse them with cold water after they have cooked. So we are filling this soba noodle salad. It's going to be a chilled salad. So we're filling it with a bunch of different seasonal veggies. So you can use this same kind of base recipe of the soba noodles and the dressing that we're going to make for it. And you can always just kind of switch up the veggies to whatever's in season or to whatever you like. So don't feel like you have to stick to the veggies that are written in this recipe. This is just our summer soba salad. But you can, it's very customizable to whatever you like. So we're starting with green beans. So green beans or string beans, they're in season in the summer. We haven't used them yet in the cooking series, so I thought this would be a good place to add them in. So because we're not cooking this is a chilled salad, I write in the recipe to blanch the string beans. So blanching is just a really quick way to kind of like par cook the vegetables. So they're not getting fully cooked. It's like if you're parboiling potatoes for something, you're just getting them kind of partially cooked. So that's what blanching does. Blanching is a way to partially cook them. So we're not cooking them to the point of getting like super soft and tender, just tender enough that we're not biting into a super crunchy raw string bean in the salad. We want them to get a little bit tender. So what I had here was whole string beans that I just trimmed the ends off, and then I cut the string beans into thirds so that we have, you know, smaller pieces. So we don't want a big long string bean in the salad. We want everything kind of chopped up. So I just cut the string beans into thirds, and I have a pot of a pot of water behind me that is boiling. So to blanch, we just put the string beans. You could do this with really any vegetable. It's a good way. Blanching is a good way to get like a head start on some sturdier vegetables that maybe need a head start on cooking. If you're making like a stir fry or something, and certain vegetables take longer to cook than others, you can blanch some of them first so that they get a little head start on cooking. Blanching is also great for like a crudité. If you're putting broccoli out, for example, instead of serving raw broccoli, you can blanch it real quick, and then instead of it being raw, it's a little bit more tender, and it also changes the color. It also makes them brighter green. So there's a few different reasons why we would blanch. So like in this case, we're putting these vegetables into a chilled salad. They're not getting cooked. So for some of these veggies, like the string beans, we don't want to eat them raw. So these are just going right into boiling water. They're going right into boiling water. Oops. Okay, and so different veggies take longer to blanch. So these string beans will take about 3 minutes or so. Something like broccoli, and also depending on the size they are. So something like broccoli florets, if you were blanching those, they only take like 30 seconds. And you want to give them, you know, a little stir around. You can also season the water with salt. So if you're doing something like a crudité where you're eating the veggies raw and you want them to have a little bit more flavor, you can add a pinch of salt to the water, and then that's a good way to get them seasoned also. Okay, so those are just gonna sit in there for a couple minutes. And then, so what I'm using to get them out of the water is a spider strainer. So that's this guy. You can also just use a slotted spoon, but you want to use something that when you're scooping it out of the water can drain. Then we're going to plunge them into an ice bath. So I have a bowl of cold water here. I'm going to add some ice cubes to it. This is called shocking. So we're blanching and then we're shocking. So we're cooking really quickly, just getting them partially cooked just to tender. And then we're plunging them in this ice bath to stop the cooking so they don't get overcooked. So that's a blanch and shock method. Okay. So you can give them a stir a couple times around while they're in here. So what we're gonna do here, and I wrote this in the recipe too, as a tip for having one less pot to clean, is we're blanching the veggies first, and then we're just gonna bring the same water back to a boil and cook the soba noodles right in here. Don't worry, the water is gonna turn a little bit green, but it won't affect cooking the noodles at all. So it's just an easy way. If you're already boiling a pot of water for one thing, you may as well just keep using that same pot of boiling water. And of course you can taste one just to make sure that it's nice and tender. Yeah, these are just about good. Okay. And we're doing a more Asian-inspired dish today. We're using Bok Choy. So the recipe is written for one baby Bok Choy. This is a full-grown Bok Choy. I couldn't find baby Bok Choy when I went shopping this time around, so I'm just going to use like half of this. But so this is Bok Choy. I'm going to get those string beans out real quick. I just take them out with a strainer and put them right into our ice bath. So we don't want to drain the water. So that's also why we want to use this kind of spider strainer or a slotted spoon because we're not draining the water because we're using it again. Okay. I'm gonna cover this up. Okay, so this is a bok choy. So bok choy is actually a Chinese cabbage. So while it looks like a leafy green, it's actually in the cabbage family. So it's actually a cruciferous vegetable, which is in the same family as other kinds of cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, all of the things that are known for making you a little gassy because they have so much fiber, right? So bok choy is really high in fiber. Which, like I said, can make you a little bit gassy if you are sensitive to cruciferous vegetables and the fiber that's in them. But the fiber is also really good for your colon health, for your heart health, right? Because it helps clear everything out of your colon, and it helps to clear out some cholesterol from your body, which is why it helps with your heart health. So that's why cruciferous vegetables are really great. They have the fiber in them is, particularly healthy. And the bok choy, the leaves themselves do contain a lot of the same kinds of nutrients that we talked about when we were talking about dark leafy greens last week. That there's folate in here, there's, all different fat-soluble vitamins that act as antioxidants in the body. So lots of good health benefits here. So I just trimmed off the very ends and the very ends of the stems and the very ends of the greens, just because they're a little icky looking, and I washed this already. So with bok choy, if you're using a whole bok choy, the bottom, the stems can get really dirty, so you want to make sure you rinse that well. And then we want to blanch the stems because we can use the stems, but they're more firm than the leaves, right? The leaves are a lot more delicate. So the leaves can just be raw in the salad, but we want to blanch the stems. So I'm just gonna cut off, I'm gonna pull the leaves off like this. Like I said, the recipe just calls for 1 baby bok choy. So if you find that, you don't really need all of this, but I'll use it all. Okay. All right, so the stems, I'm just gonna just roughly chop them. And I'm gonna go toss these into our boiling water. Okay, and those will just blanch for like a minute. So while that's going, we'll just chop up the green parts. You can just, chop up like you would any other greens. So they kind of take on like, a little bit of the cabbage kind of flavor, but also, the greens are kind of like a little bit more, they kind of remind me of collard greens. They're a little bit more bitter than something like spinach. Okay, so that's it for that. So the greens we can just set aside. Okay. All right. And we can pull out these little stems now. Okay. All right, so now we're gonna bring that water back to a boil real quick, and then we're gonna toss the soba noodles in there. So we want 8 ounces of soba noodles. Most packages will be 8 ounces. For some reason, this package that I found is like 12.5 ounces, so I'm just not going to use all of it. Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, so you'll usually find soba noodles are packaged in bundles. They come like cutely wrapped up in these little bundles. So in an 8-ounce package, you would use, it's usually 3 bundles. So just take the little wrapping off of them. And we don't need to salt the water with these like we do with regular pasta. Okay, so going right into our pot. So just like I do with spaghetti, I like to use tongs for any sort of long noodles. It just helps with stirring them and keeping them apart. Okay, and like I said, each package is going to be different, so let's see even what this one says. Whoop. Yeah, so this one cooks in like 3 minutes actually. So just pay attention to what your package says, because you don't want to, they're more delicate as it is, so you don't want them to get like overcooked and mushy. So we're going to keep a close eye on these. I'm going to set a timer actually so I don't forget. Okay. And you'll notice too, I mentioned that they're starchier, so that's why we rinse them with cold water when they're done cooking. So you'll notice also in the pot that the water is going to get a lot more cloudy looking than maybe you're used to with regular spaghetti. So that's normal. That's just because they're starchier. Okay. So we're going to have 1 whole red bell pepper. So we talked about red peppers last week with our sweet roasted red pepper sauce. So in this recipe, the red pepper is just getting sliced up thin and going in the salad raw. So I will show you how we do this. So we want this cut like a julienne. So that's a very thin strip. Because they're raw, we don't want super big pieces of red pepper. So we want them nice and thin. So I start by just cutting off the very ends. And then we can use the ends so they don't have to go to waste. We can cut them up. Cut a slit in one of the, see that? Just cut a little slit there. And then you're just gonna run your knife through until it opens all the way up. And we can just slice out that middle. And that's garbage. There we go. So now all the seeds and everything, whoops, all the seeds and everything is cut out. So now what we can do is cut these into smaller pieces. And now you have, a much easier piece to just cut into strips. So you can just cut them as thin as you can get, really. So that's it. So that's all we need to do here. So we get these nice strips. And you always want to be cutting a pepper from the inside, not from the skin side, because the skin is slippery. Your knife won't really get a grip. So doing it from the inside is going to give you a better grip and therefore be a lot safer. Okay, so that's the noodles. So I'm gonna go check those. And so that's why, having some basic knife skills. Okay, all right. Okay, so those are done. So those cooked up in like 3 or 4 minutes. So I am putting them, there's like a piece of pepper in here, colander. So I have a colander sitting in the sink here. So we're just gonna pour those in and then rinse with cold water. So I was saying that having some basic knife skills, it's not just about, being able to make pretty cuts and all these fancy julienne and all that kind of stuff. It's about being more efficient in the kitchen and being safer. So it can help you, having some confidence with your knife can help you get through chopping things much quicker. Not that like I'm any sort of, you watch these like Bobby Flays and other Food Network chefs and stuff, and you watch them just, go cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. Like I'm not there, so I don't expect you to be there. But having some basic knife skills can help you be a little bit more efficient so that you can get your cooking done a little bit quicker, but the most important thing is that it helps you be safer. So just little things like cutting things, I'm always talking about getting things into stable positions so they're not rolling around, and cutting from the inside of the pepper instead of the outside, because on the outside your knife could slip. On the inside it has a less chance of slipping, right? So just little things like that can make a big difference. So it is really important to, if you're not someone who spends much time in the kitchen, spending some time on your knife skills is really worthwhile. Okay. Take the string beans and the bok choy stems that we blanched, and they're sitting in the ice bath. I'm going to just take them out, and I have a clean dish towel here. So I'm just going to sit them here to dry it off. And then another bowl saver, we're going to use this same bowl to put the salad together. Spread those out. So using your dish towels for cleaning and, for washing and drying your produce is a really good way to save paper towel, which I don't always do, but should do more. Okay, so like I said, we're just recycling the bowl. We're going to use this bowl to put the salad together. So I have my noodles here that I drained and rinsed with cold water. I'm going to put them right into the bowl. And we're going to just drizzle them with some toasted sesame oil. So this is what the soba noodles look like. This lighting is terrible. It's like worms, but I swear they don't taste like worms. But so the buckwheat is very brown, so they're even, they're even a darker brown than just regular like whole wheat spaghetti. They're more like a brown gray. So that's normal. That's what they look like. So we're going to drizzle these with a little toasted sesame oil. So that's just going to help them while they sit here not to stick. And it's going to add flavor to them. Toasted sesame oil in particular is super flavorful. We're going to use it in our dressing. But that's something that I recommend to do whenever you're cooking like spaghetti noodles, especially ones that like really stick together. If you're not using them right away, drizzle them with some olive oil, some kind of oil to help prevent them from sticking together while they sit. Okay. So we're just gonna set this aside while we finish working on our veggies. Okay. Okay, and so the rest of the pepper, you can kind of just cut it up, into the same kind of strips so that we don't have to waste it. Alright, so with the top here, you just cut off any usable parts. And then here, I'll cut these guys a little bit thinner. All right. And then we are putting carrot in, so we want 1 cup of grated. You can either grate the carrot on a box grater on the big side, or you can cut them into matchsticks. So matchsticks is what you see, you know, like when you see like slivers of carrots, maybe in a salad mix or something like that, that's what that is. So I will show you how to do that. So the matchstick, they're gonna be a little bit thicker. So if you don't wanna be, you know, crunching on the carrot, you might wanna do the grated where they'll be a little bit thinner. But ooh, I missed the spot peeling. So we want to wash and peel the carrot first. Cut off our ends. And then, now these aren't super thick carrots, but so we want to cut at a deep angle. So you can see this is straight knife and I have it at like a 45-degree angle or so to cut that first piece off, so that now I have this nice diagonally cut carrot. And we're gonna cut thin and keep cutting across in that same shape, so you end up with pieces that look like this, nice ovals. So we're gonna keep cutting those. Like I said, it's a little bit easier with thicker carrots. Okay, and then we take these pieces and we cut them lengthwise, thin, straight across. And then that's how you end up with these matchsticks. All right, so that's one way that you can do them, or like I said, it's kind of tedious. So you can also just grate the carrot on a box grater, and that will work just as well. So I'll do the second carrot with the grater. You know, and also just in general with, you know, with your knife, you always want to have your hands in this bear claw position, have your fingers tucked under, especially when you're doing something like this that's super, you know, it's like little. When you're cutting really thin, your fingers help to guide you, but you don't want them getting caught under the knife. Trust me. Okay. All right, so that's the matchstick. Otherwise, we can just cut the ends and then use the big side of the box grater. I like to start with the thicker end and just run it down the grater. Again, you want to be careful here too, obviously, with your fingers. So this is just kind of a quick way. Right, so then with the grated carrot, we get a lot more of this like shredded, you know, so it's not going to be as crunchy. So it's whatever your preference is to do it either way. But we want a cup of carrot, so it's about, it should be about 2 large carrots. Okay, so that's that. And then of course the matchsticks too, if you have a bigger carrot and they're really long, you can of course cut them in half once they're, you know, cut the strips already in half. Okay. So let's, oh, and the scallions, okay. All right, and then we have 2 scallions. So we're going to cut up to our branch here, or a little beyond. We want to reserve the green parts for garnish, and we'll put just the white parts into our salad. We want them thinly sliced. We've done scallions a bunch, so know how to slice those up. And if you want to get fancy with scallions, you can cut them diagonally, which is called cutting them on a bias. So sometimes you'll see like a scallion garnish, right? That'll look, it's the same kind of idea we just did with the carrot, where you start by cutting on an angle, so now you have this angled end, right? And then you would just continue cutting on an angle. And that's how you would get more of these kinds of pieces versus the round pieces. So, if you want to get fancier, you can cut them on the diagonal, or on the bias is what that's called. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is make our dressing. So that's where all the flavor comes in for this one. So with this vinaigrette, we're making, we of course need some oil as our base. So you want to use ideally some sort of neutral flavored oil, because olive oil will impart an olivey taste. And we want all of these other flavors to really stand out. So if you have some sort of neutral flavored oil, whether that be sunflower oil, safflower oil, like an organic canola oil or some kind of vegetable oil, that would be good. Okay, so we want 3 tablespoons of our oil. Okay. Then we want the juice of a whole lime. And of course, one of the biggest knife safety things you could do is use a sharp knife. Right, so that was, I feel like that's kind of a misconception, is that, you know, using a sharp knife is more dangerous. Well, yeah, if it hits your hand, like if it hits your finger, it's gonna cut you. But you have less of a chance of it cutting you because it slides through the food so much more easily. If you're using a dull knife and you're having to like saw at something, or like with the pepper, like it's not able to grasp on, so it has a better chance of slipping, you have a better chance of hurting yourself. So a sharp knife is actually safer because it does its job better. So once you're equipped with the, you know, with the right confidence and skills to use a sharp knife, it's much safer than using a dull knife. So we're using 2 tablespoons of some sort of soy sauce. So this is shoyu. It's just the way that that it's processed. You know, that that it's fermented and all that. So you can use shoyu. You can use regular soy sauce or low sodium soy sauce. Or tamari. So tamari is gluten-free, usually. Just make sure that it says gluten-free tamari on it. So that's usually the best option for if somebody has to be gluten-free. So if you're doing these 100% buckwheat noodles because you're gluten-free, use tamari. That's like a hidden, soy sauce is like a hidden source of gluten. So be cautious of that if you are gluten-free. Okay, so we want 2 tablespoons of whatever type of soy sauce you're using. So we're not adding any salt to this. because soy sauce is very salty itself. You can taste it at the end, and if you feel like it needs some more salt, you can always add a little pinch of salt, but you shouldn't have to. Okay, 1 teaspoon of the toasted sesame oil. So you'll see regular sesame oil and toasted sesame oil. So toasted sesame oil is going to have a much stronger, bolder flavor than regular sesame oil. It's truly toasted sesame seeds that have gotten their oil, taken out versus just raw sesame seeds. So, like always, I always talk about roasting nuts, and you get a whole different kind of flavor. So that's what this is here. Okay, and a tablespoon of rice vinegar. So rice vinegar is the kind of vinegar you'll typically see cooked with different sorts of Asian foods. So that's what we're using here. 1 tablespoon of rice vinegar. Okay, and then we need 1 clove of garlic that's been minced. So you want 1 to 2 cloves. Again, if it's a big clove like this guy, I'm just going to use 1. If you have smaller garlic cloves, you can use 2. Just mince that guy up. You can also, if you like things a little bit spicier, this is really good with some red pepper flakes added into it. You can add them right into the dressing here. And these ingredients that are in this dressing are basically what I would consider staple pantry items to have for Asian-inspired cooking. So rice vinegar, some sort of soy sauce, toasted sesame oil. Toasted sesame oil because we're using it in this chilled dish, so it's not getting cooked. But when you're doing like a stir fry or something, toasted sesame oil is really best for finishing because the flavor is so strong. Like, you wouldn't cook in toasted sesame oil. It's meant to be more of a finish. So just as your stir fry is done cooking, you would put in, a drizzle of the toasted sesame oil just to add some flavor to it. And that's what it's really meant for. It's not meant to, you're not meant to put 2 tablespoons of toasted sesame oil in the pan for cooking. It's really meant for its flavor. Okay, so garlic in, and we're doing a teaspoon of grated fresh ginger. So I have ginger here that I already peeled. A tip for peeling ginger, you can use a regular vegetable peeler, but ginger has all these weird nooks and crannies in it, so it can get kind of difficult to peel. Using just a regular metal spoon, you can dig into those curves and get all the peel off. So that's a really good way to peel ginger. And then you could just mince it, but it's actually just easier to just use a grater, just like we did with the carrot. But I like to use a grater like this. Want small pieces, so I'm using the small grater. And just grate away. We want a teaspoon. And you're just gonna get a very different flavor from using fresh ginger compared to using granulated ginger, like a dry spice. So I do recommend using fresh ginger. And fresh ginger, of course, you probably know, is really good for digestion. So you could make homemade ginger tea. If you ever have an upset stomach, you can just slice pieces of ginger and steep them in boiling water and make some fresh homemade ginger tea. Okay. All right, this is probably about a teaspoon. Okay, so just dropping that in there. Okay, so that is our dressing, vinaigrette, whatever you want to call it. So just whisk that all up. Okay, and this is going to go right over our noodles. So let's get those back here. So I like to dress the noodles and then add the veggies in, because you really want the noodles to get, you know, nicely dressed, and then there's plenty of extra that will coat the veggies when we toss them in. Okay, so it's all going in there. Toss around with the tongs. Okay, so the noodles are all dressed. So now is a good time to taste once the noodles are dressed and make sure you like, you know, the flavor. If you feel like it needs a little bit more of anything, you can go for it and add a pinch of salt if you feel like it needs it, whatever you like. Yeah, no, I don't think that needs anything else. Okay. So good. Okay, so now we can add in all our veggies. So I'm just gonna toss all my carrots in. Got my scallions. Okay. Actually show you what I'm doing here. Okay. And the red pepper. And our bok choy greens. Probably not going to add all of them in here. Got our string beans and our bok choy stems that we blanched and chopped and drained and dried. So it really, like, you know, the soba noodles are really just a base for all of these fresh, delicious summer vegetables. And so this serves up really well as a lunch. You can serve it for dinner with, you know, some protein of your choice. I think this is really delicious with some salmon. Okay. All right, so we have here, and our last thing is our cilantro. So we want a 1/4 cup of chopped up cilantro. You can reserve some to use as garnish. Just nice rough chop. Again, I always talk about adding in our fresh herbs at the very end, especially these delicate ones like cilantro, so they don't get bruised or wilted. All right, so I'm gonna throw a bunch of it in here, and then we'll save some for some garnish. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so that's that. We are going to garnish with the rest of our cilantro, the greens of the scallions, and I like to finish it off with some sesame seeds. You could toast the sesame seeds, but I think that's a nice way to finish it off. So there they are. About to fall out of the bowl on my computer, but you can see. Okay, so these smell so good. So that's it for this recipe. So like I said, once everything's all chopped up, if you're making this at home on your own time, you could totally, of course, chop up these veggies ahead of time. So if you have like a day that you do some meal prep for the week on Sunday or whatever it is, you could definitely cut up all the veggies ahead of time so that it's all ready to go. I would cook the noodles fresh because they're so delicate and kind of sticky, so it's best to just cook them. You know, they cool down once you rinse them in the cold water. But you can have your vegetables all prepped and ready to go, and then when you're ready to cook the noodles, you can just assemble everything really easily, so it comes together nice and quick.